Imagine yourself walking through a fog-covered field where the cold doesn't burn but cradles. The damp ground beneath your feet exhales the ancestral scent of wet earth, and in the distance, the sound of a slow bell echoes among sparse trees. We are in a time when the world seemed to slow down. The splendor of Roman cities is now nothing more than ruin. The stone aqueducts are cracked, the temples are empty, and the theaters, where once people laughed, now house owls and silence. Time has moved forward, but like someone walking slowly along a road that no longer knows where it leads, it is here, in this lukewarm interval between what was once grand and what has not yet been born, that the Middle Ages begin. It did not begin with a bang, but with a sigh. The fall of the Roman Empire was not a single-day event, but a dragged-out, almost sleepwalking decline, like an old man falling asleep in front of the fire while the world around him changes. Europe, once connected by Roman roads that carried merchants, soldiers, and news from one end to another, has now become a patchwork quilt. Isolated villages, local lords, and a population that was beginning to forget what the brilliance of classical civilization once felt like. Books still exist, some hidden in monasteries, but most are asleep, sleeping in silence, wrapped in dust and Latin chants that echo through cold stone churches. What defines this new time is not only the absence of what once was, it is the replacement of certainty with faith, of law with promise, of citizen with servant. And in the midst of it all, a vast, starry sky silently watches a humanity that seems to seek meaning in the invisible. The world becomes enchanted once more. Night is not just darkness. It is home to demons, saints, miracles, and unseen dangers. Every thunderclap could be a divine sign, every failed harvest a punishment, and every prayer an attempt to tame the unknown. People wake up with the crowing of the rooster and fall asleep to the sound of wind blowing through the cracks of mud and wood houses. Life pulses slowly, marked by the seasons and the church bell. Few know how to read, many have never seen the sea, and still there is an almost serene beauty in this forgotten time, a beauty born from simplicity, from the smell of wood burning in the stove, from the sound of a harp strummed by calloused fingers beside a fireplace. The Middle Ages is not only a time of war and darkness, it is also a time of waiting, a time when each day was lived at the rhythm of nature, slow, organic, repetitive, like a heart beating just enough to keep going. This is the world we are about to enter, a world where destiny is written between silent monks and blood-stained swords, where every stone has a name, and every cross along the road holds a story no one tells anymore. The Middle Ages invite us to walk slowly, to listen more than speak, to observe the details of time, the creak of wooden wheels, the song of the blacksmith hammering iron at dawn, the whisper of a fearful prayer. We are no longer in the age of great cities, we are in the age of small lives, and in them rests the soul of this forgotten era. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. Imagine this world before you. Feel the chill of the wind, the warmth of the fire, the scent of leather, hay, and fresh bread. We are beginning. The Middle Ages did not arrive with banners, but with the silence of an observer. And in silence, it still lives. Imagine an ancient city, vast, proud, and orderly. Wide streets paved with neatly aligned stones, white marble columns reflecting the sun, fountains singing beside squares where philosophers spoke and children ran. This was the Roman world. A world where order had a name, a form, and a structure, where laws were written on bronze tablets and all roads led to Rome, as if the very planet revolved around its grandeur. But now, all of it fades like a dream at dawn. The fall of Rome was not an earthquake, nor an explosion. It was a slow extinguishing of oil lamps, one by one, over the course of centuries. From the 3rd century after Christ onward, the empire's borders began to tremble. Barbarians pressed in, finances collapsed, armies revolted, and emperors died at an alarming rate. The Roman order, once firm like the marble of its forums, began to crack. With each new invasion, each new plague, each new tax, the people began to retreat, abandoning the cities, returning to the countryside, trading the future for the survival of the present. When the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed in the year 476, there were no fireworks or cries, only silence. An empire does not die in an instant, it dissolves. Its laws, once recited with precision, became muddled. Its roads, once guarded by soldiers, were now overtaken by weeds and bandits. The Roman world, built of stone, turned into dust, and what remained was uncertainty. The barbarian peoples, Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, Franks, Saxons, took the reins of what was once Roman order, but they did not build upon it. They settled in the ruins, and in the ruins, time moved differently. The idea of a citizen so central to the Roman world was lost. No one was Roman anymore. Coins changed, languages fragmented, and even Latin, the foundation of ancient knowledge, began to morph, becoming something new, strange, sung with different accents. Then came the void, a void where for a long time ancient knowledge fell asleep. Libraries were burned, forgotten or abandoned. Aqueducts were no longer repaired. Public baths became places of suspicion. Hygiene, science, debate, and critical thinking ceased to be priorities. In their place, fear grew, and with fear, faith, or the attempt to find in it a refuge from chaos. But not all was darkness. During this same period, monasteries were founded. Monks copied ancient texts with ink-stained fingers and eyes tired from candlelight. Fragments of Plato, Aristotle, Galen, Hippocrates, and so many others were preserved in silence, hidden within the cold walls of abbeys lost among forests and mountains. It was a time of whispers, of survival of knowledge, a time when a single papyrus page could be more valuable than an entire wheat field. The collapse of the empire left behind an orphaned world, orphaned of government, structure, and centralization. A world where each village came to depend only on itself, where roads became dangerous, where strangers were viewed with suspicion. Night once again became a mysterious territory, forests, realms of invisible beings, and the sky, a dwelling place for gods, angels, and omens. The end of Rome is not the end of the world. It is the beginning of another world, quieter, more fragmented, more rural, a world where life came to be measured by the rising sun, the harvest, luck, and blessing. The security of cities transformed into the fragility of villages, and in place of the emperor came the feudal lord, authority decentralized. Power, once concentrated, was now divided into small parcels of land. Close your eyes, hear the sound of footsteps on dry leaves, feel the cold breeze on your face, coming from a crumbling tower. The Middle Ages advance slowly like someone groping in the dark, and in that darkness we will begin to see, not with our eyes but with our senses, the time of order is gone. Now begins the time of the sacred, the everyday and the invisible. Morning begins before the sun. There are no alarm clocks, no glass windows, no distant sound of engines. What one hears softly is the crackling of burning wood, the whistling of the wind through wooden cracks, the distant bleating of a sheep, and finally, the deep echo of the church bell, that slow, grave sound that marks the passing of hours, even when the sky is still grey. In the medieval village, time is circular, paced by bells and seasons, not by minutes and seconds. It is a time that does not rush. It simply exists. The houses are simple, made of mud, wood, and straw. The floor is beaten earth. The air inside smells of smoke, warm milk, and damp wool. There are no rooms, no privacy, no luxury. But there is life. The mother lights the fire with practiced hands. The father stretches near the doorway, eyes turned to the sky to understand the mood of the day. The children still sleep together, hugging to share warmth. And around the house, chickens peck aimlessly between dung and dry leaves. The routine is constant, predictable, peaceful in its hardship. Before the sun is high, the men go to the fields. Plows pulled by oxen cut into the damp soil, while calloused hands guide the wood with care. The women, with veils over their hair and worn skirts, tend to the gardens, spinning wheels, bread, and small animals. The elders tell stories to the young. The children run among the trees, throw stones in the river, help where they can. It is not a carefree childhood, but a natural one, without distractions, where every gesture already teaches something about the world. In the villages, almost no one can read. Knowledge is oral, passed down through songs, tales, and gestures. Marriages are arranged. Celebrations revolve around harvests and religious dates. The wine is thin, but it warms. The bread is hard, but it feeds. Winter is cruel, but also a time for pause, for introspection, for dreams told by the fire as snow covers rooftops in white silence. The village revolves around the church, small, made of stone, cold inside. But there, time seems to touch the divine. The priest is one of the few who can read, and his words, even in Latin, which few understand, carry weight, carry magic. He announces miracles and punishments. He baptizes, buries, marries, and forgives. At times he is the only link between the world of men and the world of God. When he passes, eyes lower. When he speaks, silence reigns. And surrounding everything, nature, present, imposing, alive. The forest holds secrets. The rivers carry stories. The fields bloom and wither as if they were breathing. Nature is not contemplated. It is feared, respected, lived. A thunderclap may be a warning, an eclipse, an omen, a lone deer, a sign. Medieval spirituality is inseparable from the earth. Every illness, every loss, every blessing finds its explanation in the skies, not in books. The medieval village is not romantic. It is harsh, simple, repetitive, but it is also deeply rooted. People's names come from the tasks they perform. Identity merges with labor. There is no haste, no ambition beyond what is needed. There is only the present, the field to harvest, the bread to knead, the cattle to guide. And when the sun sets, everyone returns home. The light goes out, bodies rest, and the bell rings once more, like a whisper from above, saying that the day is over, and that tomorrow it begins again, just the same. Close your eyes, breathe slowly. You are in a small house, lying under rustic blankets, listening to the firewood crackle. Outside, the moon rises through thick clouds. The world slows down, and the Middle Ages silently lives on in every slow and necessary gesture. Imagine a distant hill covered in thick fog, where a grey stone castle rises, silent and solemn. Its towers touch the cloudy sky. Its battlements hold stories of arrows and whispered pacts. The wind blows strong up there, carrying the scent of forage, rust, and approaching rain. The castle is more than a structure. It is the heart of an entire world, a world where every inch of land is tied to a promise, and every life is bound by invisible threads of duty and obedience. This is how the feudal order was shaped. At the center of this system is the feudal lord, the owner of the land. Not a king, not a god, but something in between for those who live below. He does not command imperial armies or write universal laws, but he holds power over everything his eyes can see: villages, fields, forests, people. His castle is a symbol of stability in an unstable world. Inside, beneath vaulted ceilings and worn tapestries, the alliances that sustain society are forged. Alliances sealed with sweaty hands, bent knees, and words heavy with honor. Below him is the vassal, the one who pledges loyalty in exchange for protection and land. The ceremony is simple, yet full of meaning. The vassal kneels, offers his hands, and swears fidelity. The lord lifts him and grants him a piece of land, the fief. With it come responsibilities: to cultivate, to defend, to obey. The land is not just space. It is the foundation of survival. Earth is the field where wheat grows, the pasture where cattle graze, the river that gives water to the village. To own land is to have power. To lack it is to depend on those who do. Further below are the serfs, peasants who own nothing but their bodies and the time they give to labor. They are not slaves, but neither are they free. They live on the Lord's land and in exchange for protection give part of their harvest, part of their sweat, part of their days. They cannot leave without permission. They have no right to decide their children's fate, but they are not alone. They live in community, sharing the same pain, the same winters, the same meager crops. The feudal system is like an old tree, full of intertwined branches, deep roots, and leaves that fall and return with time. Every layer of society is supported by the one beneath. Every promise, every oath, every small transgression, everything is connected. There are no written contracts. There are words given, no courts as we know them. There are councils of elders, judgments in front of the church, reparations made with goats, with wheat, with silence. Justice is oral, local, often brutal, but within it lies a sense of continuity. And the castles, so grand from afar, are cold within. Their halls echo with empty footsteps. Their stones breathe moisture. The walls are thick, but do not block out fear. They are not places of luxury. They are fortresses. Shelters from invaders, from hunger, from the unpredictable. When an army approaches, peasants run behind the walls. In times of peace, the halls become centers of decisions, frugal banquets, whispered trials, and stories murmured by the fire. Everything moves in circles. The serf plants, the vassal protects, the lord governs, and all look to the sky, hoping the gods, or God, will favor them. Feudal life is made of repetitions: spring, summer, autumn, winter, birth, labor, prayer, death. But there is comfort in that too. A sense of belonging, of order. In a world where the unknown frightens, predictability brings peace. Close your eyes. Feel the breeze rising from the plains to the castle walls. Hear the distant sound of hammers shaping horseshoes, the lowing of oxen in the stable, the clinking of a Wells chain being pulled. This is the sound of the feudal order, a world that turns slowly with its own rituals, its own silences. And in that rhythm we move step by step, through shadows, promises, and stone. Close your eyes. Imagine a wide field covered in mist. The damp ground holds the traces of footprints that are no longer there. A broken spear, a cracked shield, feathers from arrows scattered among the tall grass. The scent of blood has already been carried away by the wind, but the silence, that remains, and it speaks. It speaks of a time when war was not a distant event, but a constant cycle. The Middle Ages were a period where conflict did not begin or end. It simply slept for a while until it awoke again. Medieval wars were rarely as grand as the poems suggest. Most of the time they were small, repetitive, local. One feudal lord invaded another's land over a border dispute out of pride, over a stolen cow or a broken promise. The battles lasted hours, but the tension lasted weeks. Peasants, helpless, ran to the castles. Crops burned. Wells were poisoned. And after the fighting, people returned to work, as if life had only held its breath for a brief moment. But not all wars were local. Some crossed oceans, deserts, and continents. Such were the Crusades, movements driven by faith, politics, and desire. The Pope called and the people answered. Simple men left everything behind in the name of a distant Holy Land. Kings saw in it a chance for power, glory, or forgiveness. And so, thousands departed. But few returned. Many died along the way. Others fell ill. Many simply disappeared into the vast sands of the East. Those who came back brought stories, strange objects, scars, and a new way of seeing the world. During the Crusades, East and West touched. Europeans saw larger cities, older knowledge, more exotic fragrances. They encountered spices, fabrics, mathematics, a different medicine. But they also saw war on another scale. Greater fortresses, more disciplined armies, new weapons. And though the ideal was religious, the result was far more complex. Profound cultural exchanges, lasting resentments, intensified trade. And still, the emptiness left when one realizes that the human heart hasn't changed all that much. Meanwhile, on Europe's borders, other wars raged. Christian kingdoms tried to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslims in the so-called Reconquista. In the north, Vikings still left their marks. In the east, the Byzantine Empire resisted and then gave way. In the south, the Ottomans grew like a shadow approaching. In every corner there was conflict, for land, for faith, for names, and for survival. 100-year wars, wars that crossed generations, wars where father and son fought on different sides. But do not imagine only organized armies. Most fighters were improvised, peasants called up hastily, reused armor, dull swords. Medieval war was dirty, exhausting, disorganized. Infected wounds, starving horses, constant rain, and the long wait before each clash, waiting for the enemy, for dawn, for a signal, for a cry. And sometimes the battle was just noise, dust, and confusion, and afterward only silence and lifeless bodies. The side that won gained little, the side that lost much, and those who watched simply kept planting, praying, waiting. War for the common folk was like plague or famine, something that came, passed, returned, something accepted as part of life, and resisted with patience, with prayer, with the hope that the next winter would be gentler. Take a deep breath, hear the muffled sound of drums that no longer play. Watch the dust of the battlefield settle. Listen in the distance to the fading gallop. Medieval war, though ever present, was made more of threats and absences than of great victories, and even among the spears there were sunrises. Even behind walls there were dreams. War was a constant, but life still persisted. Imagine a grey morning, with low clouds brushing against thatched rooftops. The rain doesn't fall hard. It trickles down as if the sky was sighing. The ground is soaked, the wind whistles through the bare trees, and the soil, once fertile and generous, now feels resistant, heavy, hardened by the season or exhausted from being wounded too often by the plough. In a forgotten village, a large pot rests over weak embers. Inside it, only water, a handful of roots, and a bit of hope. This was medieval hunger, silent, prolonged, invisible from afar but deep within every bone. Hunger didn't come with warning. It arrived slowly with too much or too little rain, with long winters, dry summers, or harvests cursed by invisible pests. One bad year of barley could mean an entire winter of misery. The absence of grain dried up not only the granaries but also the spirit. The body weakened, the eyes dulled, and even dreams at night began to revolve around what was missing from the plate. In the villages, when bread was scarce, everything became food. Tree bark, bitter seeds, boiled leaves, even earth mixed with flour. Mothers ate less so their children could have something. Men spent their days in the fields trying to pull from the soil what it no longer wanted to give. And the elders, they ate little and quietly. They knew their tired bodies wouldn't withstand the cold and weakness together. For them, hunger was a slow, wordless farewell. The structure of society did not help. Feudal lords had rights to the majority of the harvest, even in times of scarcity. The churches, through tithes, demanded their share as well. And for the peasants, only the bare minimum remained. Sometimes not even that. Many hid parts of the harvest, digging secret holes to protect the little they had. Others left in search of better lands, but few ever returned. Most died along the way, consumed by the same hunger they tried to escape. Hunger was not only physical, it was social, spiritual, psychological. It divided people. Brothers fought over scraps of bread. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Trust withered with the grain. And over time questions arose. What did we do wrong? Why does God punish us? Is this a sign from the heavens? Hunger was also seen as divine punishment. And so, along with stomach pain, came the weight on the soul. Prayers multiplied. Fasts paradoxically increased. Faith was the only thing that could nourish when food was absent. Yet even in those times, there was resistance. Women created recipes with whatever they had. They used ash to preserve food, leaves to wrap roots, techniques passed down from mothers and grandmothers. Men hunted in secret, even knowing the forest belonged to the Lord. Children climbed trees in search of nests, of eggs, of anything that could be turned into broth. Hunger demanded creativity, and it taught, though cruelly, the value of what is essential. Hunger also left marks on bodies, swollen bellies filled with emptiness, protruding ribs, hair falling out, rotting teeth, wounds that wouldn't heal. The doctors of the time could do little, bloodletting teas, exorcisms. None cured the absence of food, and yet many survived. And when the first green leaves sprouted after a harsh winter, when wheat finally stood tall and golden under the May sun, tears came, silent tears, from those who had faced the darkness and were still standing. Close your eyes. Imagine the scent of wet earth after months of drought, the sound of bread baking for the first time in weeks, the face of a mother watching her children eat to the last bite. Hunger in the Middle Ages was more than the absence of food. It was a constant presence, a ghost that haunted the fields, the homes, and the hearts. And yet, life went on, one grain at a time, one day at a time, one hope at a time. Imagine a quiet village, surrounded by gentle hills and damp forests. The houses, modest, made of wood and clay, rest beneath a sky heavy with dark clouds. The air is thick, the wind blows low, as if carrying ancient secrets. The leaves barely move, the animals are restless, and the people, without knowing why, can sense it. Something invisible approaches. It has no shape, no sound, but it has weight. A weight that descends with the wind, crosses the fields, and touches the skin like a cold omen. That is how the Black Death began. Not with screams, but with a strange silence. It arrived by sea. Ships coming from the east docked at Italian ports in the year 1347. Crews decimated, corpses piled in the holds, rats running across the decks, and fleas, small and nearly invisible, carrying in their bodies an enemy that neither faith, nor sword, nor medicine could stop. The bubonic plague spread like invisible fire. One day the body burned with fever, the next the lymph nodes swelled like black stones beneath the skin, and then the final breath, fast, cruel, and impossible to halt. Cities began closing their gates, church bells rang without pause. Priests could no longer keep up with the burials. Mass graves, hastily dug, filled before dusk. Entire families disappeared in days. Homes were boarded up. Carts collected bodies as if gathering dry leaves after autumn. And on every surviving face, the same expression: shock, exhaustion, emptiness. Accounts from the time speak of masked executioners with long leather beaks, stuffing their robes with herbs and vinegar. Doctors who could do nothing but watch and take notes. People said the plague came from the air, from sin, from the stars. They said it was divine punishment. And amid ignorance, bonfires were lit. Improvised culprits, beggars, heretics, foreigners, Jews. Pain turned into fury, and fury into persecution. And still, the plague did not stop. The plague did not choose. It entered castles and cottages. It took lords and serfs, priests and thieves, children and elders. The only defense was isolation. Many fled. Others locked themselves in. Some gave in to feasts and indulgence, as if death could be tricked by joy. But nothing worked. The disease crossed walls, rivers, distances. It came with the wind, with a touch, with a glance. And then, one day, it began to fade. No one knew exactly why. The wind changed, the sun warmed, and death, once a constant presence, began to disappear slowly. The world had changed. 1/3 of Europe was dead. The streets were empty, the chairs at the table silent, the fields abandoned. And those who survived carried within a sorrow that couldn't be explained, a kind of emptiness only those who saw the end of everything and remained could feel. Yet still, life returned. Grass sprouted over graves. Bells once again announced weddings and births. Children ran once more. Bread was baked again. And in churches a quiet prayer was whispered, "Thank you for letting us remain." The plague left scars that time could not erase, but it also left a new awareness, a humility before existence, a clarity about the fragility of everything. Close your eyes, hear the whisper of wind passing through the leaves, smell the wet earth after the rain. Remember, even the darkest shadow retreats when the sun insists, and even when everything seems far too quiet, life moves even if slowly. It was a strange time, almost unreal. In the stone streets, where once the creak of wagon wheels, the clatter of hooves, and the voices of merchants echoed, now only the sound of the wind remains. The doors of the houses are shut, the markets abandoned, the fountains silent, and among the alleys bodies lie beneath thick cloths, left waiting for their final walk. The plague brings no haste. It brings a suspension of time, as if the world had held its breath and forgotten how to breathe. Cities once full of fast-paced life became cold stone corridors. The bells toll endlessly, not for celebration but for mourning. Each chime marks a new loss. At every corner, a fire burns with smoking herbs. The townsfolk believe the smoke purifies the air. Some carry small vials of vinegar. Others wear amulets of bones of saints, of crosses around their necks. Science is scarce. Hope, almost none. But habit is everything. People keep lighting candles, keep praying, keep writing letters to the dead as if they might still hear. Outside the cities, in the open fields, monks pray. They walk among abandoned crops, forgotten vineyards, empty pens. They read psalms, sing hymns, trace crosses in the air. They try to keep faith alive even when the churches are filled with silence. And in small villages, families gather around fires, some in prayer, others in resignation. The sky seems closer, the stars more intense, as if the world had become small again, made only of earth, wind, and whispers. Inside homes, gestures become small rituals of resistance. Someone places dry herbs beneath pillows. Someone knocks 3 times before entering. Someone recites the names of all known saints before sleep. And even when the body weakens, the mind clings to these details. Routine becomes protection. Washing hands with vinegar, eating garlic, hanging rue branches in windows. None of it cures, but all of it comforts. Children often do not understand. They play among the dead. They dance to folk songs about angels and monsters. Some imitate priests, others the sick. And even in this time of shadow, brief laughter is still heard. Races among the trees still happen. Curious eyes still peek through cracks. Childhood resists. Adults, in turn, move between silence and weeping. Many lock themselves indoors. Others throw themselves into processions. They walk barefoot, dress in black, whip their own backs in search of forgiveness. Some become devout, others become cruel. The plague does not only sicken the body, it reveals the soul. Some embrace, others abandon. Some die embraced, others die alone. The bodies slowly stop being frightening. They become part of the landscape. A neighbor yesterday, a stranger today, a brother tomorrow. They are taken in carts, stacked in pits. But sometimes, someone places a flower, a scarf, a candle, a sign that there was love, that there was memory. Life during the plague is not only pain, it is also effort. Effort to hold on to humanity, even when the world seems to be unraveling. Close your eyes. Imagine a lit candle in a dark room. It flickers with the breeze. The flame dances. The room smells of burned wood, of leather, of dust. And despite everything, life is there, still burning, still fighting not to go out. The plague took many, but it never took everything. Imagine yourself inside a small dark room with narrow windows and damp stone walls. The air is dense, a mixture of candle smoke, dried herbs hanging from the beams, and a faint metallic scent coming from iron basins. There is a wooden table stained by time and use. Upon it, clay flasks, coarse cloths, rusted instruments. In front of it, a man with a stern face and trembling hands, the healer, the doctor, the barber, or all at once. This is the setting where medieval medicine unfolds, between attempts, traditions, and faith. Medicine in the Middle Ages was not guided by certainty. It was steered by theories inherited from antiquity, mixed with religious beliefs and folk practices. The dominant idea was that of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health, it was believed, depended on the balance among them. When someone fell ill, diagnosis came not from tests but from the observation of the eyes, the colour of urine, the texture of the tongue, and the position of the stars. Healing came through bloodletting, prayers, fasting. Bloodletting was common. A vein was opened in the arm, the foot, or behind the ears. The blood flowed in silence, sometimes for minutes, sometimes until the patient fainted. It was believed that as the blood left, so did the illness. Another frequent practice was the use of leeches, small creatures gathered from lakes and placed on the skin to suck out the excess humours. They latched on tightly, fed slowly, and then detached, full of what was imagined to be disease. But healing didn't come only from cuts. Herbalists were respected for their knowledge of plants. Lavender for rest, sage for the throat, rue for the evil eye, nettle for rheumatism. The kitchens of humble homes were also small pharmacies. Women prepared teas, poultices, and ointments with herbs gathered at dawn, when dew still covered the leaves, and each remedy was accompanied by a prayer, a sign of the cross, a word whispered into the ear of the sick, as if relief came as much from the plant as from the intention. In larger cities, there were hospitals linked to monasteries. They were not centers of healing as we know them today. They were more shelters of compassion. There, monks cared for the sick with warm water, prayers, and silence. Death was common, but the care was sincere. The patient was seen as both a body to be soothed and a soul to be prepared. The bed was covered with simple sheets. The food was light, and beside them always a crucifix, so that even in pain the spirit would not feel alone. The illnesses were many: mysterious fevers, wounds that would not heal, aching bones, tremors, blindness. Most had no name, most had no cure. But people endured. They turned to patron saints: Saint Agatha for cancer, Saint Roch for the plague, Saint Lazarus for lepers. Pilgrimages were made, promises fulfilled, and sometimes, even without improvement, there was comfort. because in faith there was solace. But not all the sick were welcomed. Lepers, for instance, were cast out. They lived in separate colonies. They wore bells around their necks to signal their presence. They passed through the streets with lowered eyes, receiving alms from a distance. And even so, many smiled, sang, prayed. They turned exclusion into a space of resistance. Medieval medicine, between errors and insights, was deeply human. It touched the body with fear. It touched the soul with tenderness. And even without understanding the causes, it sought relief. Sometimes a cup of warm water was all that could be offered. Sometimes a prayer. Sometimes just presence. The silence of someone by the bedside was already a healing gesture. Close your eyes. Imagine the sound of herbs being ground in a mortar, the scent of camphor in the air, the soft light of a flickering candle against the wall. You are in a time when knowledge was fragmented but compassion whole, where pain was constant but hope persistent, where the body ached but the spirit found shelter in the simple care of those who stayed until the end. It is dawn. The sky is covered with heavy clouds, and the stars barely shine behind the grey haze. In a small house of wood and clay, with no glass windows, only a single candle lit in the corner, the muffled sound of a deep, rhythmic effort can be heard, almost ancestral. A woman is in labor. Her hands grip rough sheets, her eyes tighten in pain, and sweat runs down her face while the midwife, kneeling, gives firm and compassionate guidance. There are no hospitals, no scalpels, no anesthesia, only courage and faith. Childbirth in the Middle Ages was a ritual of risk and surrender. Many women did not survive. Many children never breathed. Infant death was so common that names were often given only days after birth, when there was some certainty the tiny body would endure. Some mothers lost 3, 4, 5 children before seeing one grow up, and still, with every pregnancy, there was hope. With every faint beat in the womb, a new beginning. With every fragile cry, a rebirth of faith. Medieval women carried the world in their arms and on their backs. They rose with the sun, lit the fire, cared for children, kneaded bread, spun wool, sewed clothes, tended animals, gathered herbs, healed wounds. And yet they were seen as fragile, impure, inferior. Most of the time knowledge was denied to them, reading restricted, their voices silenced. But even without writing, they narrated, with gestures, with lullabies, with deep silences. Midwives were central figures. They held ancient secrets passed from mother to daughter, about sage infusions, warm baths, prayers whispered bedside. They knew the signs of the body, the rhythms of nature, the limits of what could be done, and they knew, without needing words, when life was arriving and when it was leaving. Some were called witches, others angels. All in some way faced the invisible with steady hands and calm eyes. When a child died, mourning was silent. The body was washed with warm water, wrapped in simple cloths and buried in shallow graves, sometimes without a name, sometimes marked only with a cross made of dry branches. Mothers cried alone, often in hiding. The death of a baby was seen as something natural, as if the heavens had called it back too soon. And yet the pain remained, not in the eyes, but in the hands, in the milk that would not be drunk, in the empty cradle, in the name that would never be spoken. The suffering of medieval women went beyond childbirth. It was the burden of carrying an entire household, of accepting arranged marriages, of living under the rule of father, husband, or confessor. It was the constant fear of being accused, of witchcraft, of adultery, of irreverence. Submission was the rule, but it was also silently resistance. Every baked loaf, every wound tended, every child rocked, was a gesture of strength. Female illnesses were many, hemorrhages, infections, nameless pains, and treatments were scarce. Often the answer was isolation, or penance, or silence. Women learned to endure, to conceal, to carry on, not out of weakness, but out of habit and out of love, because they knew that if not for them, no one else would do it. And even so, there was joy when the baby cried loud, when the child took its first steps, when the bread rose in the oven, when music played at festivals. Women danced, laughed, sang together. They insisted on living, even when the world pushed them aside, even when death stood near. even when exhaustion was immense. Close your eyes. Imagine the sound of an old lullaby, murmured by a mother as she rocks her baby wrapped in cloth against her chest. Feel the warmth of the wood-burning stove, the scent of milk boiled with honey, the weight of silence between two contractions. You are in the heart of the Middle Ages, where pain did not scream but whispered, and where, even without recognition, women held the world with steady hands and infinite soul. Imagine a battlefield after the storm. The grass is soaked, stained a dark red, broken spears, shattered shields, helmets sunken into the mud, and lying there men who just hours before screamed for glory, now breathe in silence, interrupted only by pain. Medieval war was short, filthy, loud, but the suffering it left behind was long, quiet, and filled with scars. The life of the soldier, so often idealized in paintings and songs, was an unending cycle of cold, hunger, waiting, and wounds that never truly healed. Before the battle there was the march. Miles walked under sun, rain, or snow, carrying heavy armor, poorly sewn boots, shoulders aching from shields and sacks of provisions. Many soldiers had no training. They were peasants summoned in haste. Their bodies were fragile. Their hands were used to hoes, not swords, and still they were placed on the front lines, side by side with knights in gleaming armor, as if fate made them equals only at the hour of death. During the fight, the noise was deafening, the clash of metal, the screams of the wounded, the galloping of horses, the snap of spears breaking against another man's body. But the true horror began afterward. When the bodies fell, the wounded remained, moaning, begging, breathing in agony, severed arms, open bellies, faces smeared with blood and dirt. Those who survived the battle still had to survive the infection. Wartime medicine was improvised. The injured were brought, if they could walk, to a barber surgeon's tent. A man with tired eyes, steady hands, and very few tools. There, under a filthy canopy and candlelight, the inevitable took place. Wounds were cauterized with red-hot iron. Gangrenous limbs were amputated with saws without anesthesia. Open wounds were packed with wool soaked in wine or vinegar, and the patient bit down on a piece of wood so they wouldn't scream too loudly. There were also ointments made of honey, animal fat, crushed herbs. Some relieved, others merely dulled the pain for a moment, and there were prayers. Many doctors began their procedures with prayer, as if they knew healing depended more on the heavens than on their own hands. Those who survived often didn't return whole, limping, blind, missing arms, with noses sliced off, deep scars across the face, and worse still, invisible marks inside the mind. Trauma was a constant companion. Men who couldn't sleep, who cried for no reason, who flinched at thunder. Physical pain might heal with time, but the pain of the soul, not always. Many returned to their villages as heroes, but inside, they were shadows of what they had once been. And still, when called again, they returned to the field, out of duty, out of faith, or because they had no choice. Medieval war had no hospitals, no effective medicine, no psychologists, only courage, improvisation, and silence. And even so, there was solidarity, comrades who held each other's hands, who shared their last piece of bread, who closed the eyes of the fallen, who buried their brothers in arms with stones on their chests so wolves would not take them. Close your eyes. Picture a silent field at dusk, covered in light fog. Hear in the distance the crackle of a fire being lit. Smell the damp leather, freshly cut earth, blood long dried. Even in the harshest of times, there was humanity. Even in the deepest pain, there were eyes that still shined. And even in war, there were men who dreamed of returning home. It is autumn. The leaves fall slowly, and the fields, once green and abundant, now appear worn, tired. The earth is cracked. The furrows from the plough dissolve into dust. The ears of grain, few and small, no longer fill the wicker baskets. All eyes turn to the sky, but it remains silent. No clouds, no rain, no sign. The fasting begins not by choice, but from absence. The stomach shrinks. Bodies slow down. Hunger returns, not as a visitor but as an old acquaintance. For the medieval peasant, food was a direct reflection of nature's temperament. A dry summer or a harsh winter could turn an entire year's labor into failure. Seeds wouldn't sprout, pests would spread, frost would burn the sprouts, and when the harvest failed, there was nowhere to turn. No stocked markets, no public granaries, no organized relief. There was only the field and what it didn't yield. Bread, the staple of the diet, began to disappear from tables. In its place came bran cakes mixed with sawdust, bitter roots boiled in muddy water, thin soups made with whatever could still be found, small onions, wild leaves, carefully gathered mushrooms, sometimes an egg, sometimes a piece of dry cheese, but most often only the silence of the empty pot. The body learned to endure with less, and the spirit tried not to break. Children were the first to feel it. They lost weight, grew pale, their legs wobbled, their eyes dulled. They cried less, not from strength but from weakness. The elderly shared what little they had. Sometimes they pretended not to be hungry. Other times they ate earth mixed with flour, as if the stomach could be fooled. And when scarcity lasted for months, entire families were forced to move, abandoning villages in search of more fertile land. Many died along the way, others never returned. Even so, some tried to maintain order. The feudal lord continued to collect tribute. A tenth of the harvest, even if it was almost nothing, was still demanded by the church. Some tried to hide part of the wheat, burying it in clay pots, protecting what they could. But the fear of being discovered was great, and sometimes hunger became a cause for punishment. A stolen cow, a hidden ear of corn, a broken branch could lead to prison or the gallows. The suffering was collective, but so was the consolation. Families came together, they shared bread, cooked together, took turns with what little they had. Religious festivals, even with less food, still took place, because faith was a kind of nourishment. Prayers asked for rain, for crops, for protection, and every drop that fell from the sky was celebrated as a miracle. When wheat sprouted again, there were tears, there were embraces, there was laughter among the tall ears of grain, as if life had returned. Forced fasting taught the value of every berry, every grain of rye, every seed stored with care. Food for the peasant was more than nutrition. It was a blessing, it was survival, it was gratitude. And even when hunger tightened its grip, eyes turned to the sky, not in revolt, but in supplication. There was still something to hope for, something to plant, something to harvest. Close your eyes, smell the scent of the earth after the first rain. Hear the sound of a hoe breaking open the damp soil. See in your mind the image of a golden ear of grain in the calloused hands of a farmer. Hunger in the Middle Ages was a long shadow, but one that always retreated with the first ray of hope. For the peasantry, though fragile, was made of faith, persistence, and roots deeper than the soil itself. Imagine a village shrouded in mist. The houses are few, made of weathered wood darkened by time. At the center, a stone chapel with a slightly open door lets out the sound of a slow, repetitive, almost sacred chant. Inside, a few candles burn. The air smells of incense and mold. And the faces turned upward plead, for health, for protection, for relief. In the Middle Ages, where medicine was uncertain, faith became the greatest remedy, and the invisible more present than touch itself. Medieval life was deeply spiritual. Everything was seen as a sign, a lightning bolt, a howling animal, a child sleeping too long, an unexpected, bountiful harvest. Natural explanations existed, but they were rarely accepted. For the common folk, the world wasn't just made of stone and flesh, it was made of mystery too. And in that mystery lived the saints and the witches. Witches, often wise women, herbalists, midwives, or healers, lived on the margins of the forest, of the village, of conventional thought. They used roots, leaves, baths, and ancient prayers. They knew the moon's cycle, the right time to harvest. But one sudden death, one strange illness, one rotting crop, and their names were whispered with fear. It was her, they said. She stared too long. She cast a spell. And so, many were persecuted, not for real evil, but for being different, and sometimes simply for being free women. On the other side were the saints, men and women seen as models of virtue, martyrs, intercessors. When someone fell ill, people sought a relic, an altar, an image. Saint Roch for the plague, Saint Agatha for ailments of the breast, Saint Blaise for the throat. Every pain had a divine name, every affliction a candle lit, and often something happened, a sudden improvement, a deeper breath, a halted cry, and everyone said it was a miracle. Miracles in the Middle Ages weren't always spectacular. They were subtle, a wound that healed, a baby who stopped coughing, a fever that broke after a prayer. People saw in this the touch of God. And those who received a miracle often made a promise. They walked on pilgrimages to distant sanctuaries, donated food, fabric, days of fasting. Faith expressed itself through the body, in steps, in exhaustion, in surrender. Many churches housed sacred objects, bone fragments, pieces of saints' clothing, vials with dried blood. It was said that touching them healed, that seeing them was enough. And crowds came, even from afar. They slept on the ground. They fasted. They touched with trembling fingers what they believed to be a bridge between heaven and earth. But faith was also mixed with fear. Fear of demons, of spirits, of curses. People crossed their chests when certain names were spoken. Salt was thrown in the corners of houses, ribbons tied to trees. Bread was blessed, doors marked with charcoal. Everything was protection. And between the sacred and the profane lived the medieval people, walking a ground where heaven and hell were always within reach. Close your eyes. Imagine the sound of a distant bell echoing on a cold morning. See a candle flickering on the altar, surrounded by dried petals and silent promises. Smell the crushed lavender between your fingers. Faith, in that time, was as dense as the mist, as close as breath itself. And even when pain tightened its grip, there was always a prayer being whispered, a candle being lit, a hope, however small, sleeping in the heart of the believer. Imagine an endless plain, covered in low mist. The field, once green, is now brown, trampled, marked by hoofprints and cartwheels, pieces of discarded leather, half-buried spears, bones exposed among the grass. The wind blows slowly. War has passed through here, but the earth still holds its memory. In the Middle Ages, war was not an isolated event. It was a constant presence, a cycle, a burden, an echo repeated in every generation like a curse. There were wars that lasted for years, and there was one that lasted more than a century. The 100 Years' War between France and England, for example, was more than a dispute over thrones. It was a succession of campaigns, skirmishes, battles, truces, and betrayals. Soldiers were born, grew up, and died without ever knowing peace. In a world where maps shifted with the moods of kings, combat was the only language truly understood by all. Horses, central figures in these conflicts, were not just a means of transport. They were weapons, moving armor. A mounted knight, clad in iron from head to toe, was a symbol of power. But he was also weight and slowness. Hooves crushed mud and bodies alike. The smell of war came from the animals. Sweat, hay, wet leather. The sound of hooves mixed with screams created a soundtrack that haunted those left behind. Armor, though imposing, rusted easily. Steel required constant care. It was polished with sand, vinegar, and steady hands. But rust persisted, just like the mud that clung to the joints. And men rusted too. Fatigue took over. Eyes aged by trauma. Hands hardened by the sword. Skin used to the cold of night watches and the heat of torches. Hearts turned to stone, not out of cruelty, but from repetition. Wars were waged for small and large reasons, for land, for names, for inheritance, for insults, for faith. Often the people didn't even understand the reasons. They just saw the armies arrive, and what they left behind. Scorched fields, violated women, looted granaries, poisoned wells. War was a hungry beast, devouring whatever it found. Wheat, goats, hopes. In some battles the sky seemed to vanish. Arrows flew like rain. Men fell like dry leaves. The ground turned to mud mixed with blood. And afterward, silence. And a prayer. Someone spoke the names of the dead. Someone placed stones over a body. Someone returned home with something missing, a piece of flesh or of soul. And still, there was music. On some nights, in makeshift trenches, soldiers sang, laughed, remembered home, shared stale bread, sour wine, and a secret or two. War hadn't made them less human. It had only hardened them. But beneath the armor, the heart still beat. Close your eyes. Hear the sound of leaves rustling in a cold wind. Imagine the ring of a sword being sheathed. Smell the iron rust, the worn leather, the dust of the road. Medieval war had no heroes like in the books. It had tired men, dreaming of harvest, of their wives' faces, of a warm bath. War was constant, but the longing for peace never went away. Imagine a pale stone building hidden among green hills and centuries-old trees. Around it, the sound of birds, the soft wind blowing through the cypresses, and from time to time the distant echo of a bell. This is the monastery, a place of retreat, of silence, of order, a world apart within the Middle Ages. While wars raged, while cities sank into plague and hunger, the monasteries were like serene islands, where time moved more slowly and life followed the rhythm of the bell and prayer. Upon entering, the aroma is a mixture of old wood, dried parchment, and freshly baked bread. The cold stone floor echoes beneath bare feet. The hallways are long, with bare walls and narrow windows, where light filters in as golden beams. Monks in dark robes walk silently. Some carry books, others carry water, but no one runs, no one shouts. The monastery is built on discipline, and also on peace. The monk's routine is governed by the canonical hours. 7 moments of the day dedicated to prayer. They wake before the sun, face washing with cold water, first chant, then reading, manual labor, text transcription, herb cultivation, caring for the poor and the sick, and in the evening, another prayer, and then silence. They sleep early, in simple beds, in rooms without luxury. They dream perhaps of eternity, but there is a special place within each monastery, the scriptorium. It is there that the copyist monks turn ancient knowledge into permanence. By candlelight, with tired eyes and steady hands, they transcribe, letter by letter, the texts of the ancients: Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Galen, the Bible, of course, and also treatises on medicine, astrology, poetry. The sound of the quill scratching the parchment is like a prayer. Time dissolves there. A single manuscript may take years to complete, but they persist, with patience, with faith, as if saving the world were a matter of preserving every word. Books at that time were not ordinary objects. They were treasures, rare, expensive, sacred. They were made from animal skin, sewn by hand, illuminated with inks made from gold, cinnabar, saffron. Each letter was a work of art, each page a reliquary of wisdom, and even though few could read, these books existed, waiting for the right time to be opened again. Beyond copying, the monks also tended the land. They planted, cooked, healed, crafted wine, cheese, medicine. Their medicinal herb gardens were silent, fragrant, alive. And there, among rosemary, marjoram, and chamomile, life happened with serenity. They welcomed travelers, sheltered orphans, cared for the wounded. Monasteries were often the only places where someone could rest without fear, and there was music, Gregorian chants, male voices intoning psalms in Latin, unhurriedly, as if time had no end. The notes echoed through high arches, filling the void with devotion. To hear this singing at night with windows open to the dark countryside was like hearing heaven itself. Close your eyes. Imagine the quill gliding across the parchment, the smell of melted wax, the cold touch of stone under your feet, the bell announcing the next prayer. You are inside a world made of silence and purpose, where no one runs, where no one shouts, where everything is done with intention. The monasteries were the contemplative heart of the Middle Ages, beating softly but steadily, guarding the past, cultivating the present, awaiting the eternal. Imagine a moonless night. The sky is pitch black, and the wind blows through the trees with a sound that resembles whispers. In the distance, a dog howls. No candles are lit, no light in any window. People have already retreated indoors, not only out of fatigue, but out of fear. Because in the Middle Ages, night was not just the absence of light. It was the realm of the unknown, and in the dark, the invisible walked freely. The medieval man lived between two worlds, the physical and the symbolic. Every gesture, every sign, every strange smell, every unusual sound could be a warning, an omen, a reminder that the world was inhabited by more than what could be seen. Spirits, angels, demons, saints, witches, apparitions, enchantments, all these were as much a part of daily life as bread and wine. To deal with the invisible, rituals emerged, small, repetitive, silent, tossing salt over the left shoulder, tying a sprig of rue at the house's entrance, placing an iron cross over a baby's cradle, not leaving the house if the rooster crowed 3 times at the wrong hour. saying a precise number of prayers before bed, avoiding the name of someone recently deceased. All of this was for protection. Superstitions didn't come from nowhere, they were born from fear, and fear, in turn, was a reflection of a fragile life. Death could come from a fever, a wound, an animal, a war, and when it came without explanation, the soul searched for answers wherever it could. A neighbor who stared too long, a priest who hesitated in his blessing, a black cat crossing the path. The mind, in its quest for meaning, made invisible connections, but comforting ones. Folk beliefs passed from generation to generation, often without words, just gestures. A grandmother taught her granddaughter how to bless water. A farmer showed his son how to bury a knife in the earth to prevent hail. And even those who didn't believe still did it, just in case. Because fear didn't need proof, only action. In the villages, certain places were avoided. Old wells, twisted trees, stones with strange shapes. They said beings lived there, that something had happened there, that one shouldn't pass there after sunset. And even when no one knew exactly why, they still obeyed. Because collective fear shaped the space, it created secret maps where reason had no place. And then there were dreams, messages, warnings, signs, a relative appearing, an unusual color, an animal, a repeating number. Upon waking, the dream was told to the mother, the priest, the healer, and one waited for the interpretation. A dream could change someone's day, or make someone change their path, because sleeping at that time was like crossing a bridge into the unexplainable. But not all fear was superstition. Some came from within, from unspoken grief, from longing, from loss. And in those cases, there were rituals too, lighting a candle, walking in silence, fasting, humming a chant. The soul sought comfort in details, in the sound of running water, in the smell of bread, in the warmth of sunlight after frost. Close your eyes. Imagine the crack of a twig in the middle of the forest, the soft sway of a wind chime hanging on a porch, the muffled sound of someone praying behind a closed door. The medieval mind was full of doors, doors that opened to fear, to mystery, to comfort. And even when the world seemed hard to understand, there was always a candle lit, a whispered prayer, a protective gesture. Imagine a morning when the whole world seems to have fallen asleep. The landscape is blanketed in snow. The trees stand bare. The fields are white as veils. The air cuts the face like a frozen blade. And the sky, that same sky that throughout the year sends rain, lightning, and burning sun, now simply watches, without color, without haste, without response. This is the medieval winter. More than just a season. It is an event. A time of year when time slows down and the body feels the weight of survival. In small villages, wooden doors are reinforced with heavy latches. Windows are covered with hides and thick cloth. Inside the homes, the only source of warmth is the hearth, and sometimes not even that is enough. Families gather around the fire, they share thin soups, whisper old stories, divide blankets. There isn't much to do. The ground is frozen, the days are short, the nights long as months. Provisions are counted with anxious eyes. Wheat, rye, salt, a strip of dried meat, a piece of aged cheese, a few fruits preserved in ash. What exists must last. What is missing must be forgotten. And the stomachs, already familiar with scarcity, now learn the true silence of hunger. Winter also brings illness, coughs, pneumonia, flu, aching bones, wounds that won't heal, hands cracked by the cold, feet that bleed while walking through snow. Doctors, rare as they are, can do little. Remedies are made with honey, warm wine, dried leaves, and prayer. Healing, if it comes, comes slowly. If it doesn't, then let death arrive in sleep, warmed by a blanket and a soft hymn. But not all is darkness. Winter also brings a deep kind of introspection, of closeness, of reunion. It's a time when people truly listen to each other, when old stories are told, when mothers sing their children to sleep, when clothes are stitched from saved-up scraps, and between silences there is space for hope. Children, even in the cold, find joy in the whiteness of the snow. They shape snowballs, slide down slopes, try to warm their hands with their breath. They laugh, they run, and they remind the adults that life, though hard, still pulses, still shines even beneath the ice. Monks in their monasteries pass the winter in silence as well. But within the cold stone walls, Books continue to be copied. Prayers continue to be sung. Bread is still baked with devotion, and the bell rings, always, as if to say time has not stopped. The world has not ended. It is merely sleeping. When the ice begins to melt, when the first green sprouts break through the hard soil, when birds begin to sing again, there are tears. There is gratitude, a quiet, humble joy, like meeting an old friend after a long absence. The sky, silent for months, begins to speak again, with gentle breezes, golden light, and the promise of yet another cycle. Close your eyes. Imagine the snow melting slowly under the rays of the rising sun. Hear the crackling of firewood, the clinking of a suspended cauldron, the muffled sound of a blanket being tucked. The medieval winter was not just cold. It was a time of trial, of scarcity, but also of tenderness, of sharing, of resilience. And when it passed, the world seemed reborn. Imagine a medieval town, but with something new in the air. The church bell still rings, the markets still fill the square, the carts still roll through narrow alleys, but there's a different sensation, a new scent, a different brightness in the eyes of those passing by, as if the old world is still there, but its foundations are beginning, gently, to shift. This is the end of the Middle Ages, and like anything deeply rooted, it doesn't collapse. It transforms, slowly, in silence. After centuries of darkness, conflict, plague, and hunger, people begin to look beyond the walls once more. Cities grow, trade returns with strength, merchants travel along ancient routes, bringing silks from the east, spices, perfumes, new maps, and with them come ideas, words, stories from other worlds. For the first time in a long while, the horizon awakens curiosity again. On the shores of the Mediterranean, ports begin to buzz with activity. Venice, Genoa, Florence, cities where gold changes hands, where artists begin to be respected, where books are read again, not just by monks, but by merchants, by youth, by thinkers, and there, on the margins of tradition, something new begins to bloom. A desire to understand the world, to represent it, to question it. Universities emerge and multiply. Paris, Bologna, Oxford. Men, and still only a few women, gather to study philosophy, theology, medicine. Aristotle's logic returns to the debate. Arabic mathematics fascinates. Astronomy leaves the hands of magicians and enters the minds of scholars. Knowledge, once sacred and untouchable, is now explored, tested, questioned. In the arts, rigid saintly figures with frozen stares begin to give way to human faces, to muscles, to expression. Painters see the body not as sin, but as beauty. Sculptors seek movement. Architects dream of light. And in the cathedrals, stained glass windows tell stories in color. Art is no longer only devotion, it becomes a mirror. Yet the old world resists. There are still feudal lords, still villages sealed in their rhythms, still plague, fear, and dark nights. The Inquisition expands. Wars continue. Witches still burn at the stake. And yet, something is changing. Like the first flower blooming at winter's end, even while snow still covers the fields. The Renaissance doesn't explode. It blossoms. First in whispers, then in verses, then in paint on canvas, and then in thought. The Middle Ages begin to fade like a candle that has fulfilled its purpose. It lit, it warmed, it guided, but now another flame will be lit, and the people, even without knowing it, feel it. The clothes change, the buildings change, the words change. The world, once small, now seems vast again. There are rumors of lands beyond the sea, of books multiplying on printing presses, of machines that might fly, of men who look to the sky and say, perhaps it does not revolve around us. Close your eyes. Imagine the sound of a brush dipped in golden paint, the voice of a young philosopher reading Plato in the sunset light, the smell of fresh parchment, the vibration of time as it shifts. The end of the Middle Ages was not a collapse. It was a crossing, a long sigh between two worlds, and those who lived through it walked among ruins and rebirths. Close your eyes. Imagine a very old stone wall. The surface is worn, rough, marked by time, but if you run your fingers over it carefully, you'll feel grooves, small marks, as if each brick silently told a story. The Middle Ages may have ended, but they didn't disappear. They still live on in the details, in the invisible legacies, in what we forget we've inherited. Many of the words we use have medieval roots. Lordship, fief, cloister, squire, maiden, chapel. Each term carries centuries of use, echoing the lives of villages, monasteries, and markets. Even surnames, Rodriguez, Fernandez, Martins, come from the times when a father's name became a family name. And so, language carries the dust of ages. The stone roads in some cities still follow paths once traced by monks, merchants, and knights. The bridges we cross were often rebuilt atop medieval ones. The church towers we see in the distance were raised by hands long gone, yet they still hold bells that have rung at the same hour for centuries. And there are habits that began long ago: eating at fixed times, sharing bread at the table, celebrating festivals around the agricultural calendar. Easter, Christmas, Carnival, all filled with symbolism, prayers, and rituals, either emerged or were deeply transformed during the Middle Ages. Even those who don't believe still repeat gestures that began with monks, peasants, brotherhoods, and processions. The idea of community, of village life, of mutual protection, of caring for neighbors, so present in small towns, is a direct descendant of feudal relationships. The logic of bartering, of trusting a spoken promise, of respecting another's sacred space, all this comes from a time when rules weren't written on paper, but in glances. Bell towers, stained glass windows, cloisters, crypts, stone crosses at crossroads, these are all traces of the invisible, remnants of a world where the divine was everywhere, where even diseases and winds carried meaning. And even though we see the world differently today, places still hold that ancient whisper. Entire cities sleep atop medieval ruins. Modern squares cover ancient markets. Avenues cut through paths once walked by pilgrims. And sometimes it's enough to pay attention to a street name, a forgotten fountain, a bell ringing for no reason, to feel it. History hasn't gone. It's just asleep in the cracks, and not just in the stones. It's in music with deep roots, in folk tales, in legends passed down through generations, in inherited fears of the dark, of silence, of forests, in symbols we still tattoo, in prayers we whisper without noticing, in gestures with our hands. The Middle Ages live within us, like a scar, but also like an inheritance. Close your eyes. Imagine walking down an old street. The stones echo under your feet. A window opens. A candle flickers. You smell fresh bread. You hear, in the distance, a chant. And for a moment, you don't know what century you're in, because time sometimes folds in on itself, and history sleeps in every corner of stone, waiting only for someone who's willing to listen. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Now imagine your routine, the bells that mark noon, the church atop the hill, the habit of saying good night, the dates on the calendar, the structure of schools, the architecture of cities, the rites of passage, birth, baptism, marriage, funeral. All of this has deep roots, and many of those roots were born in a time we call the Middle Ages, but that in truth never fully left us. We live with names inherited from medieval lineages. We speak languages shaped by centuries of coexistence between Latin, Arabic, Celtic, and Germanic tongues. The days of the week still carry the names of planets and gods, and the very idea of time, dividing the day into hours, the year into months, time marked by bells, was molded by monks who organized daily life with prayer, silence, and work. The universities we attend, the way professors teach, even the layout of classrooms, were born in monastic cloisters where monks copied books and debated ideas beneath Gothic vaults. The concept of a diploma, of graduation, of a thesis, all echo a model created to train clerics, jurists, doctors as far back as the High Middle Ages. Even modern law, with its rituals and symbols, still bears marks of ecclesiastical courts, village councils, punishments for broken oaths, relics used for swearing. Many legal terms we use today, witness, sentence, forum, inheritance, are echoes of the medieval world. Our collective fears also have medieval roots. The fear of night, of isolation, of plague, of divine punishment, the instinct to seek culprits in times of crisis, the compulsion for rituals when the world feels out of control. Even today, in modern times, we repeat ancient gestures. We hang protective objects, make promises, avoid certain words, as if our ancestors still whisper in our ears, asking for caution, faith, and patience. Even the way we look to the sky, seeking something greater, is medieval. The separation of the sacred and the profane, the impulse to give suffering a deeper meaning, the veneration of relics, the spiritual pilgrimages we now call mystical tourism, all of these are living remnants of centuries spent among churches, monasteries, villages and castles. But there is also a luminous inheritance, the resilience of peasants who kept planting even after famine, the hope of midwives, the care of monks, the art that bloomed on cold stone walls, the music that endured through wars, the written word that survived hidden in silent parchments. The Middle Ages, with all its suffering, was also a time of building, of endurance, of patience, and of faith, in the broadest sense of the word. Today, we walk upon the foundations of that time, and even without seeing, we live under the same sky, the same cycle of seasons, the same search for shelter, for nourishment, for meaning. And perhaps in realizing this, we might look back not with superiority, but with respect, because much of what we are still sleeps silently within the walls of the past. Close your eyes. Hear the sound of a bell fading in the distance, the murmur of an ancient prayer, the scent of parchment, of wet earth, of fresh bread. The Middle Ages were, but they also are. And as you drift to sleep, cradled by stories that cross centuries, remember, the past is not dead. It has only changed form. And it still speaks, and softly, to those who know how to listen.